Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of 10 Board Games Ranked. So I make a video like this every now and then whenever I play 10 new to me games, and I rank them from my least favourite up to my most favourite. Now before I get into the 10 games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games. And if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 10, I have Abandon All Artichokes. So this is a deck deconstruction game where you want to be the first player to abandon all of your artichokes. So you're doing that by shedding these artichoke cards by playing other cards essentially, and you can do that in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes it's just a matter of top decking, or some cards will synergize with each other where you can play one card that will help another card that will give you a bit more predictability and more accuracy about what's going to happen and how to get rid of those cards or the artichoke cards more efficiently. And there's a little bit of back and forth as well, where you can maybe give your artichoke cards to other players and back and forth, that kind of thing. But for me, the game was pretty flat. It didn't really have much depth on where you could go with this. Now, there were a couple of little tricks and synergies with the cards, but once you've used and explored those couple of tricks, there really wasn't anything else to unravel or to discover. So I think after a play or two, you've pretty much seen everything here. It's there's a lot of luck, and I think some cards are significantly better than other cards, even though there's no cost disparity. So it's a little bit imbalanced in that respect too, but it's a very light game. It's very quick, a bit of silly fun, and I still think that deck deconstruction mechanism could be explored so much further, but I don't think Abandon All Artichokes is the one to really showcase that mechanism. At number 9, I have Beast. So this is a brand new hidden movement game where one player plays a mythological beast. I'm trying to achieve different missions on the board while the other players are trying to track them down and ultimately kill them. Now, hidden movement games are a strange one for me, because although I like the concept of them and the concept of them on paper, in actuality I find them quite frustrating. Now, something I have to say about Beast is that I think it did a good job of being able to, once you've tracked the beast down, you can kind of get into a bit of a skirmish and keep tracing their path rather than maybe restarting again each time. So it does have that kind of cat and mouse effect, a bit stronger than some other hidden movement games. But ultimately, the game was a little bit too tactical for me, because it is card driven, and the way you take these cards is through a pass and draft. And sometimes the cards will be like attack cards or movement cards, but sometimes it means that you don't have a good balance of the two. So even though I might know where you are, I've got nothing in my toolbox to hurt you, and that can add some more frustration. Lovely production. There's some different game modes and different beasts you can play with. I have only played this the once, and I will certainly give it another go because it didn't take too long. Definitely didn't outstay its welcome. And there were some really cool concepts here as well. You can have these little helpers going around and helping the beast out. You've got to kind of spin quite a few plates and defend different areas. And there's even like these spotlights and things where you can find the beast's footsteps. So some good ideas here. I think this might be a matter of personal tastes rather than objective criticism of the game as to why it ranked so low. But as for now, I'm not really feeling it, but that could change with more plays with those different beasts. We shall see. At number 8, I have Coral. Now this is an abstract strategy game, as you are fitting these kind of L-shaped blocks together, and the idea is you are trying to have the most of your symbols exposed from a bird's eye view. And inevitably you are going to start overlapping other players' symbols. They're going to do the same to you, and it's all about how it ends by the time the game ends. So another game that's pretty tactical. There are some placement restrictions that can make it a bit more puzzly, and it is lightning quick. But a bit like Beast, this one felt a little bit too tactical for me. And if you're playing with, say, 3 players, if 2 players get in a bit of a feud and start overlapping each other, then that third player is probably going to naturally benefit because they're being untouched and can just lay things without any competition. So it does have that kind of third player advantage, if you want to phrase it that way. But it's not bad. I think it's another example that abstract strategy games generally aren't my jam. I don't find the tactical nature of them or that short-term thinking overly satisfying, and it doesn't really pay off for me. And that's probably why I was lukewarm at best on Coral. At number 7, I have Gallinus. So this is no doubt a big disappointment for me. Gallinus is a game that I've been looking forward to for quite a long time. It's a worker placement game, but there was one thing about it that really did intrigue me, and that was the idea that you can switch from placing your workers into resolving your actions whenever you like. So it's going to go around in turn order as any other game would, but some people might still be placing their worker on by the time you're resolving your actions. And because there is a priority and definitely a need to go quicker and resolve your actions because there's a scarcity of the resources and things on the board, then that's actually quite an interesting decision to make. Unfortunately, I don't think that mechanism was enough to save the generic gameplay here, because essentially all you're doing is you're leveling up this track and then trying to heal as much of these disease cubes on the board as possible. And it just becomes a bit of a spamming mechanism where you charge up, clean as many cubes as you can, and repeat and repeat and repeat. Now they did have quite an interesting resource mechanism, all these different kind of tracks you're climbing up which would affect each other, but there was some kind of counterintuitive ways that worked, and I've gone in a little bit more detail when I've reviewed it, because I have actually reviewed this game but I've obviously not launched it yet, so keep an eye out for that upload. But yeah, this one, very generic. Don't think there's really any need to play it amongst the sea of other great worker placement games out there. Despite that mechanism being very cool, this game just did not kind of exploit that enough to make it a real keeper. So Gallinus, yeah, fell rather flat for me, and I was hoping for quite a lot more. At number 6, I have Downforce. So I'm quite ashamed to say that I've never actually played Downforce until this month. It's a Wolfgang Kramer, I think it might be Michael Kiesling as well, a racing game where you're racing these kind of go-karts around a track. It's considered to be one of the great racing games, and after playing it, I can see why it is so revered, because it is so smooth, it's so simple, and it does have quite a nice charm to it. And it has another layer of kind of decision space here as well, because you're not only trying to race your karts to obviously finish on a podium place, but you can actually bet on other karts winning, even if it doesn't belong to you or if it's not your turn. So I do like the way that works. You have kind of two pools of winning the game here. Now, the actual nature of the card play is very basic, and it's all about trying to capitalise on the board position and utilise these kind of choke points on the track in order to waste other carts' movement, because generally speaking, every cart moves at the same pace, and it's all about trying to, again, waste that movement where the carts are stuck and can't go any further. So I did quite like the way that worked. Another game that is lightning quick. I was actually very surprised that you could get this played in about 15 minutes. So I think that definitely works in its favour, and I would play this one again if somebody wanted to. It's not my favourite racing game, but it probably would be up there in my top 10, top 20. It was quite a nice one, and I generally do like Wolfgang Kramer games. And this game actually did a good job of introducing these individual player powers. They're all very interesting, so I did like the way that worked as well. So that is Downforce, considered a bit of a classic, and I'm quite glad I got to play it now. At number 5, I have Union Stockyards. So this is a game that I've been quite excited for quite some time, because this game came out of the blue, really, and it was launched on Kickstarter, a kind of an economic worker placement game with a very unique theme. This is all about running your own stockyard, slaughtering livestock for the most profit as you can, and it does have some very cool mechanisms. But sadly, much like Gallinus, I don't think the unique mechanisms here were strong enough, or they didn't play out the way I wanted them to, because this game does have a small spatial puzzle with it where you're placing these buildings down, which will make you better at doing things and help you climb tracks and increase your profit margins. But ultimately, I thought that would, I thought it was going to be a very interactive mechanism where you kind of get income by people building on your land and stuff, when in actuality it became a matter of, I bought this bit of land and I build my buildings on it. And it seemed like every player would do that, and there really wasn't that much of an incentive to do anything else. So I think another mechanism that didn't quite reach its potential. The rest of it is fairly generic. There is a little bit of supply and demand, which I tend to like, but I think this game is going to struggle for its audience because it is way lighter than I thought it was going to be in terms of its complexity. And because of that niche theme, I don't think that the generic or maybe gateway audience of board gamers are going to be interested in it. And anybody who is interested in this theme is probably going to want something a bit more complex, richer, and something that's going to have that longevity, because, generally, I think I've noticed over the years is that the more weird a theme is, or the more specific a theme is, the heavier the game is. This one is not going to have that broad appeal, and it's not got the depth of gameplay to satisfy those more niche gamers. So a bit of a mismatch in terms of what this is going for, I feel, and I think that's going to hurt it. But the game is fine. I would say give it a go if you see a copy out there, because it's a solid, well-rounded game, but it just wasn't quite what I was looking for. At number 4, we're going all the way back to the year 2000 with The Princes of Florence, another Wolfgang Kramer game. Now this is considered one of the kind of the classic Euros, I suppose. It's one of the original polyomino style games as you're building these, well, your own little province, I suppose, with these little buildings and little gardens. And it's a very restrictive little board you have to build on, and you do actually have to invest in auctions in order to break some restrictions and give you more flexibility. And I did like that urgency and that pressure to get everything you needed in these auctions. Now, if you're familiar with a game called Colosseum, Colosseum was directly inspired by The Princes of Florence. And because I like the Colosseum so much, but I did get a bit fatigued with it because I played it so much, I wanted to go back and try this one. I found it at a very cheap price many years ago. And I did like it. I like it a lot. It's my 4th favourite game out of the 10 here. But I do feel, and I rarely say this about Wolfgang Kramer games, I do feel that this game is slightly aged. I could do with a few tweaks in terms of the mechanisms, because I thought this game did rely quite heavily on the luck of the draw sometimes when it came to drawing these cards, because essentially you're collecting these tetromino tiles in order to fulfill these contracts. But you're drawing these contracts by top decking them, and sometimes you're going to top deck these cards and they're going to match perfectly what you've already built. Sometimes that's not going to happen. So it did have that big swings of luck. Now you do have some mitigation, because you can even draw from people's discard piles, and you can draw 5 cards at a time and keep one. But I've experienced firsthand that drawing the wrong card or the right card at the right time is going to determine the winner. And that's how these games played out for me. So that's left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, to the point where I think maybe the time for Princes of Florence is gone. I didn't really feel the need to own it anymore, because I've got so many great auction games in my own collection. But hey, there we go. A good one. It holds up okay, but it could have done a few more tweaks to make it great. And I know there is going to be a new edition coming out this year, so it'll be interesting to see if those things are addressed. So that is The Princes of Florence at number 4. At number 3, I have Lewis and Clark, The Expedition. So this is a deck building racing game, which is very Euro in its approach. You are collecting these cards, you're playing them, some cards will activate other cards, and it's all about resource conversion. You're converting one type of resource into another resource, and then converting those resources into moving down a river or through mountains. Now, the resource conversion and the hand management part of this game I thought was fantastic. Some great puzzly moments here, trying to map things out in the right order. I love that you have workers, not only to collect resources on the main board, but you can also use those workers to activate your cards. But if you run short of the workers, you can use some cards to activate the other cards. And it's all about trying to optimize how you play them and have as little wastage as possible. Because if you, say, overspill on resources, or if you don't manage that hand of cards correctly and have just stray cards laying out there, then you actually get hit by these punishment tokens, which can slow you down significantly. Now, I do like the idea of that, but another one where in practice it did become quite frustrating, and it does make the game drag on. And considering this is a racing game, I thought the sense of urgency was lacking here. It didn't feel like a tense race, it was a long marathon, and I think the game sadly outstayed its welcome. This game should take around 60 to 90 minutes. You're talking around 2.5 to 3 hours to play this, which I think is not on the money for me. This was probably the prime example of a game that could benefit from shaving an hour off. I can normally forgive maybe staying 20 minutes, half an hour beyond the desired length, but going an hour at least over what I would like the game to take is kind of unforgivable. So the gameplay itself is so good and so much fun, but I can't warrant getting this to the table because it simply does not warrant how long it takes. So a very near miss for me. I'll say, if you're intrigued by this one and you're not so bothered about games dragging on, then give this one a look, because the gameplay is great, but sadly that's something that I do look for, and I don't like it when games take too long. So that is Lewis and Clark, The Expedition. So only 2 recommendations this time, and the first of which, And my number 2 out of these 10 is Jorvik. So another one for Stefan Feld here. This is a game that goes back to 2016 and one that I hadn't played. So, generally speaking, I love Stefan Feld games, and I really enjoyed this bidding game. And I don't think I've played a bidding Stefan Feld game so far, so it might be his only one. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm forgetting one. But this is one where you're placing these meeples on the main board in order to collect these cards, and these cards score you points in tons of different ways, such as contract fulfillment, where you're collecting the contracts and the resources for the contracts separately. But I love the way that these auctions are resolved by placing these meeples next to the card. Once everybody's run out, then you are going to go in priority order, saying who's placed their meeple first against this card is going to get the first option to buy it, but they're going to have to pay the price for everybody else who's placed it on that card. And they can either choose to buy it or pass. And if they pass, they're going to remove their meeple, making it 1 coin cheaper for the next player in the queue. So it's got that kind of sudden death mechanism there. And that is the definitive mechanism here. And I think it's definitely enough to keep me intrigued and keep me coming back to this one. I did like the breadth of the different ways you can score. It does come with a kind of a basic mode and an advanced mode. And I think you can dive straight in to the advanced mode because it's not terribly complex. There's tons of different things you can go for, some great decisions, and it's really interesting when you think, I really want this card, but this player knows I want it. They've put their workers there just to make me pay more for it. If I don't take it, then he's going to get it for a bargain. So you've got to really consider all these decisions, and that's what I love about Euro games. And Stefan Feld is just the master. So I really enjoyed this one. A pleasant surprise because I know a lot of Stefan Feld fans don't rate this one terribly high, but I think it is rock solid and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So that is Jorvik at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Revive. So Revive is a game that I've been eagerly anticipating because it's taken a bit of time to get over here to England, but it's definitely been worth the wait because I love the gameplay here. This is such a great card-driven Euro with tons of engine building, tons of unique powers you can use, building up a bunch of powers that only you can exploit. I also like the way that this game is somewhat sandboxy, and I wasn't quite expecting that going into the game because each player is going to have their own private objectives or secret objectives that they are trying to maximize. And they could be things such as, for every step up this track, you're going to get a point, or for every one of these tiles you're on, you get a point, these style of things. But it all has a great sense of discovery as you're flipping over tiles, revealing new spots, and racing to get to these best spots to increase your engine and climb tracks, get new technologies, just a great forward momentum. And you're constantly getting stronger and stronger and stronger and taking these big grandiose turns that feel immensely satisfying. So I definitely think this one has legs. I think it's going to have longevity. People are still going to be talking about this one in 5 years' time, and the potential to expand this one is huge because you could just add a little module here and there, new powers, new factions. And I'm actually quite excited to see that, as long as they don't kind of defer from that core mechanism too much, because it is so simple and pure in the way that it plays just by playing cards or kind of resetting your cards, I suppose. And it comes together so harmoniously, and I was very, very impressed by it. And one of the best games from 2022, no doubt. So there we have it. That's another 10 games there. Hopefully you have found this video useful. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.